Michigan has fallen on some hard times in the industrialized corridors. Among those cities, Flint, Michigan, which sadly spent way too much time in the national spotlight because of a crisis over water cleanliness. It was said again last night's debate. It wouldn't happen in Grosse Pointe, the very swish suburb of Detroit, but it happened in Flint, Michigan. So we think more than most about the folks in Flint, Michigan. Our own Tremaine Lee spent time tonight at a watch party with folks in Flint, Michigan. Tremaine, good evening. Welcome. Thank you for your work, and tell us what you learned.
Thank you very much, Brian. I was listening to the conversation about the idea of the coast and appealing to Midwestern hardworking voters. And so many people here in Flint, I feel like they've been forgotten and overlooked, but they are hardworking people who understand better than most the confluence of politics, race, and poverty. And while they feel good that there are a big number of Democrats coming out to make the case on why they should be president, they're simply tired of just hearing the talk. They want action. Now let's take a listen to some of the things some of these folks had to say.
Right now, I don't think that anything is going really in depth enough to really push people one way or another. Right now, I think politics for the last 5 years has just been flash and bang. We're not trying to educate the populace or the voters.
I keep hearing the media say Joe Biden, but I don't think they're coming to our community because I haven't anybody heard. I'm not, I respect that Joe Biden was the vice president and that President Obama, he was his vice president, but I wasn't really aware of that criminal justice.
I'm hearing them kind of, pick at each other, trying to prove points that really don't matter just to make somebody look bad, try to demonize your opponent so you can look better. That's the oldest trick in the book. Like Yang, I haven't heard him today. Tonight was my first night, but he stood out the most to me because he was knowing what he was talking about and he wasn't just talking. Booker, I liked it, Booker.
These are thoughtful, practical, pragmatic voters who more than anything want these people, these Democratic candidates, to cut to the chase. Really just get to the meat of the issues that concern them. It's nice, they said, to be in Detroit, but when you come to a community like Flint, and one gentleman said that, health care is important and education is important, but if my belly isn't full and my children are still hungry, what good is any of it, right? And so it's easy to talk about white working class voters, but there are black people all across this country. You talk about industry being the bedrock of the middle class. Let's not forget what Michigan did to draw folks from the South, fleeing the violence and racism and inadequate opportunities in the Jim Crow South to places like Michigan. So much of that has faded away, but the people here want someone to address their concerns, and so far, few candidates, they say, are addressing those concerns.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.